Thank you so much, Bob, for doing this interview with us.
Pleasure, Chris. Yeah.
We're out here at what you call your catch event, right?
Yeah, catch event.
And this is something you've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, 10 years maybe.
Okay.
We show custom guitars day before NAMM. Dealers come, order those guitars. It's really fun.
The storm before the storm.
Yeah, the storm before the storm. Definitely.
Yeah.
So, we might have, you make a lot of guitars. When you make something, you got to keep making it. You can't have a model that you can't keep making.
Yeah.
But if you have, you find 11 guitars worth of killer wood, you want to do something. So we'll save that up a lot of times, and then we make these catch customs.
Okay.
And so we'll put those out. Dealers come by and buy them, and and some of them we're making a lot of guitars. But
yeah.
You saw out there's a ton of guitars.
Matt and I walked in, and it was just I think you guys out there have got like 7 tables and then walls and just all these incredible guitars.
All kinds of people, and that's before it opens.
It's before it even opens. I was telling Matt, I said, if this many people attended my event, I would call it a success, and the doors aren't even opening yet.
I know it. We got to get some outside people in to buy some, because everyone out there works for us.
Exactly.
They cost us money.
Just a little backstory on this video. You actually reached out to me, having seen us on YouTube, and were so gracious and asked if we'd love to hang out with you while we were out here, which I think is super incredible, because Matt and I are just 2 guys building guitars in a 2-car garage. And you made it pretty clear out of the gate that it's important to you to be able to pay forward a lot of the knowledge that you've learned over all of these years. So a question, and it's a 3-part question, kind of, and feel free to answer however you'd like, but being Bob Taylor and having been there as a single guy in a garage building guitars all the way up to where you are now, building what I consider one of the bigger guitar companies in the world, what advice would you give to somebody who's just looking to start building guitars? Somebody who is looking to build guitars more of a boutique level, and then if somebody wanted to kind of make a company of it, kind of where would you see some useful advice for people like that? I guess the first one being, hey, I've been watching your videos for a long time. I love Taylor guitars, Martin, Gibson, the whole thing, and I've always wanted to build a guitar. What kind of advice would you give to that person who's interested in getting
I'll give the same advice I've always given. Build a guitar.
Okay.
And then people go, well, what if I, mess up? Okay, well then mess up. Build another guitar.
Yeah.
Well, should I get some really good materials? No, don't buy good materials. Buy the cheapest materials you can find. The materials, that comes later. Get a guitar, bend the sides, put it together. Well, what if I make a bad guitar? Make a bad guitar. I always say, Michael Jordan did not learn where that basketball hoop was by shooting 1 basket a day and aiming really hard. He shot it a lot of times, to where no matter where he was on the court, he knew where it was.
Yeah.
You know how to get this way, that way. You did that by doing it a million times. Make a guitar. Well, I don't have a shop. Okay, well, the great thing about a guitar is you can make it on top of your washing machine. You don't need a shop. You don't need, the cost of entry for making a guitar is really, really low. The barrier that most people have is they want to do it, but they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So if you want to build a guitar, you're going to.
Sure.
And no one can stop you.
Yeah.
But those people who aren't sure, my push is go make a guitar. Make a disaster of it.
Okay.
And then take everything you learn. I would say throw it all away, but don't. I threw some of my early work away. I wish I still had it. I blew some up with cherry bombs, and I wish I still had it. Put it someplace. Save it for later when you're a famous luthier.
For sure.
Because you can say to somebody else, "Well, this was my first guitar looked like."
Yeah.
And then do it again, and then do it again. It's the repetition that's going to get you good, not the pain, not being like a whiz bang with your hands.
Trying to do, you're saying very similar to what I always talk about, which is people have this habit of thinking about building their first guitar, and they shoot for the stars on their first one. I'm gonna do a cutaway and an arm bevel, and I'm using master grade curly koa, and you're like, whoa, you need to build your first, not just one, but several guitars and fail so that you know what you need to improve on. And
I mean literally buy a Stumac or a Martin guitar kit.
Yeah.
Buy a kit.
Yeah.
Put that thing together. Learn how to spread glue in time to clamp it before it's dry.
Okay.
Yeah. Learn how to hammer in a fret.
Yeah.
That isn't the easiest thing to do. That's a disaster the first time you do that.
Yeah, it is.
You know, learn how to file it when you're done and them still stay in the slots.
Okay.
You know, learn what a neck angle looks like, learn all that. Do it on the cheap.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
But then migrate from that kit.
Exactly.
Because you're not a guitar builder if you only do kits.
It's true.
Right.
And yeah, that's such a good advice. Yeah, it's a good way to get your feet wet, to see if it's for you, to see if you've got the knack for it, or more importantly, not the knack for it, but the drive for it. If it's something that you're really interested in wanting to get better at.
Yeah.
So I guess the next one would be somebody who has built a few guitars. They've given them to friends, and they go, "Yeah, these are pretty good guitars." How does somebody take their guitars and maybe want to build them for a smaller audience? Not start a big company, but they live in a small town and they're looking to, hang out a kind of part-time shingle.
Well, get the guitar good enough to sell. It's got to be, if you look at my early guitars,
yeah,
they're still around 50 years later, but you're like, whoa, really? But they're crude. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. They got better as I went. They weren't like this,
Okay.
And I would say, build tools and fixtures. When I started building guitars, you went to the hardware store, bought some pliers, a back saw, a hammer, framing hammer.
Yeah.
I got a piece of pipe, put a barbecue lighter in it. That's my side
Same.
bender.
Yeah.
Get some plywood, make a mold. Now you can buy. Call up Stu Mac. You can get anything you want, right? And buy some tools, but you have to sell the guitar. Selling a guitar is like when you finally perform in front of somebody. Selling guitar is when you finally take a photograph and print it and it goes on a wall.
I love that. Yeah. So you're practicing when you're in your shop, and then you're performing when you're presenting it to an audience to potentially buy.
And the great thing about selling a guitar is there's a customer. Now, it might be a benevolent customer. I feel sorry for you, I'm going to buy this guitar. And they go away and you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
But when you get to the point where you go, okay, this is a legit guitar. I play it, it sounds good. You find someone that buys it. It might be a kind, customer that lets some of the flaws go or that doesn't notice it. But the real thing is when you sell to someone who goes, this thing buzzes on the 3rd fret and I'm bringing it back and you need to fix it. And you're like, you got to cancel your weekend.
Yeah.
You got to stay up late. You can't figure it out. You start calling someone that maybe you made friends with, like, what's going on here? Your first guitar is drying out because the wood wasn't seasoned right and the action's low, and that's when you really start learning how your guitar is. You have to go through that.
Yeah, and I've listened to your audiobook a few times, and the part that always just gives me such, it makes me feel warm inside, was that where we stand now, it's easy to look at Taylor guitars and go, every guitar that comes off the factory floor is perfect. But to hear you have those micro struggles that somebody like Matt and I have, I always
they're
say,
life-threatening micro struggles.
I always say that every guitar that goes out the door can be an asset, but it's also a liability. And especially if you've got guitars that go out a door and you realize 5-6 guitars later that, oh my God, some of those guitars, now we know where there's a known weak point in a guitar, and then it's like having to deal with that. So, and I think that's ties in really well with your analogy about performing, because it's the same thing. The first time you go out and you perform music in front of people, you might feel like you got everything sussed out, and then you stand in front of an audience and you realize you don't know these songs as good as you thought, or whatever.
Yeah.
Third part of that question, do you have any advice for somebody who's looking to, go for, okay, I'm successful, I'm building 20 to 30 guitars a year, I'm doing well, but I really want to try to be more of a manufacturer. That's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, go look at some factories and see how they do it. Learn how to scale that down to what you're doing. I would say learn some of in however way you learn it, learn some of the tenets of, maybe I might call it lean. I don't like catch words, but learn how to identify waste and eliminate it by making small little changes every day.
Okay.
That's one way. and learn how to not put effort into something you don't need. Ask yourself before you start, if I look around my shop right now at all the things that are half done because I started in on a project, an idea, out of enthusiasm and I didn't finish it. If I could get that money back, I could get that time back, where would I be on the thing that mattered, which was making a guitar, right? And so what I like to do is I say, I just want to read the end of the chapter. The chapter is, you know, shall I do such and so? Oh, that sounds like a really great idea. Yeah, man, I'm enthused about that, woke me up at night, and then I'm like, a lot of those things you discuss, you don't feel the same way. And I'll always say, look, I read the end of the chapter and it said, and they didn't do that. I'll give you a really good example. Back in the days when there were things like newspaper articles about the local guitar maker, I was that local guitar maker, and the newspaper was that newspaper. Oh, the Union Tribune wants to come out, do an article, so they send a writer out. Maybe with them comes a photographer. Maybe the photographer comes by himself. He comes into my shop or our small factory. It's candy land for a guy with a lens.
For sure.
Because maybe the thing he shot yesterday and the day before was a board of supervisors meeting. Right? So he's in there and he wants to take every picture that there possibly could be taken. Because he's enthused, he wants to do it. And after about 6 or 7 of those, I got to where I just say, look, you know the picture that your editor is going to choose, don't you? And he's like, yeah. And I go, let's take that picture. Let's go take it. And then you can, if you want to spend the rest of your day on your own taking pictures, but as far as my time, I want to take the 3 pictures that you already know the editor's going to choose. Right? So let's not do stuff that we're not going to use right now. And then you could start to have an efficient flow, because guitar, when you go from that 12 guitars a year, where you're doing every detail, it's all real perfect, and that person is paying you the right amount of money for that, so that you feel like there's some nickels left over, and you're doing okay. And now you want to make more. You're either going to have to figure out how to make yourself superhuman, so that you can make 24 guitars a year by yourself, or you're going to have to bring in some help. And if you bring in some help, the guy that's as good as you at it isn't going to work for you. They're going to work for yourself. So the law of the jungle says that the guy who's going to work for you is going to be less good at it than you. And you have to figure out how to supervise that person.
Which means you're not building, because you're supervising.
You're not building. And you got to make that efficient. You've got an expense now. So it's a hard thing. So just be cautious about it. And again, you might have to try a couple things before it works, but go for it. Me, I love factories. I love factories. And my goal was, I had 2 goals. One, I want to make a living, and I want the people who work for you to make a living. That's very easy. It's very easy to fail at that in guitar building. So I had 2 goals to do that, and I did it by, hey, go to the Mercedes-Benz factory. Does anybody on that shop floor know how to build a car? No. But did they build a factory that when they have a hive of people working together, they can build a car? A good one.
That's interesting. So a factory is a factory in that sense. Like, it's that same, a car factory and a guitar factory, very similar in that sense.
Yes, and at any level you try, and I say, try and leave no stone unturned. What is it that is wasteful in my day? You know, well, every single day I take out a tape measure and measure 17 point, make a stick that's that long. Boom, that's a tool.
Making everything as efficient as possible. So
I don't need to, I pick it up and the stick already is short enough so that my pencil line width makes the mark in the right place. That's a tool.
I have so many people that reach out to me early on, because our channel obviously is about guitar building, that kind of complain about how long it takes to build jigs for their first guitar. I'm like, you better buckle up, because that is almost, guitar building is jig building.
2 days a day. You have a day of building guitars, you have a day of building jigs. And that's how you build a factory.
It makes sense. Along the lines of what you just said, another question that I would like to ask is, like so many people who have been successful, you realize that your successes actually came from your failures. So can you, I know you probably have a lot, but can you name a few things that in the moment you were done, you were sunk, this is what's going to be the end of Taylor Guitars, that ended up being these blessings in disguise that turned into, wow, I'm so glad that that thing failed, because now look at us. We learned such valuable lessons with this one thing, whether it was a specific guitar physical building thing or it was a supply chain thing or something like that, because we have, people get it, a lot of people do get it, but so many people seem to have a hard time understanding that the failure, that's the sweet spot, at least from where I stand. If you're not failing, you're not learning. So if you can give some examples of that.
Well, I have a saying, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly, right?
Okay.
And just don't keep doing it poorly. But you're not going to be good at anything. So if you're going to build a factory, or if you're going to make guitars by yourself, there's really a lot of decisions you can make. For example, maybe the first person you hire might be a total fail. It might cost you a lot.
Yeah.
Want to hear a story?
I do.
I had 50 sets of rosewood sides and backs. That's what we had to our name at Taylor Guitars. I hired a guy to work. I came in on a Saturday one day, and this guy decided to come in early on Saturday too and get ahead on bending sides. He did that on his own, in his exuberance to do a fine job. And I walked in to him at a side bender and a pile of 40 broken sides.
And this is like your whole world is those 50 sets of rosewood.
And so that disaster, which I can't even tell you how my heart sunk.
Yeah.
In every way that a heart can sink.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
From anger to sadness to, this is going to ruin me. Well, it taught me a whole lot of things about how I'm going to train somebody, how I'm going to try to think way ahead of all the things that could go wrong and head those off at the pass.
Sure.
You know, how maybe I won't give the keys to the shop to someone who's going to come in early. All of the freedoms and it's going to turn out right. So it's a lot of those things can be just about thinking ahead. We had lessons in selling. We had disasters with finish. I remember having finish that never dried, and finally I put a little knife and I peeled it off like it was saran wrap, the whole entire finish. And I had finish we had to sand off, and we had finish that crazed. All of those things made me realize that suppliers, especially big suppliers, will change a formulation of something. The more that, if I have white plastic binding on a guitar, the more that white ABS becomes what an airline industry wants it to be, the less it might become what a guitar builder wants it to be. So then you have to learn who are suppliers that are gentle or that care about your use of that product. Our industry, we freeload off the back of bigger industries to get the things that we want.
Okay.
Right? And so some of the materials, some of the glue, some of things change. Here's something that changed over the years. When I first started using cyanoacrylate glue, it worked great. Now it turns spruce yellow.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
That's because they kept making it more and more clean and more what the medical industry wants, and less what a down and dirty woodworker wants.
That's interesting.
So the whole industry now is like we don't know how to make this stuff not turn our spruce yellow.
Yeah.
And it's the sugars in the wood and the blah, blah, all this kind of stuff. But that product changed. But if you ask the glue manufacturer, like, no, I haven't changed anything.
It's funny you say, because I've only ever known super glue that yellow spruce.
It did for the first 15 years we used it.
Wow, that's interesting. I love that. That's great. When you first reached out to me, I was really excited because as you started to kind of share your story about just kind of how you got into guitar building, it reminded me so much of my personal one too. It was a solo journey for me at first, and nobody around me seemed to really understand it. My parents were really supportive of it, which was amazing. I was always taking things apart and fixing them, and I had that same light bulb moment one day of somebody presenting the idea of building a guitar to me, and it was like, oh my God, yeah, I've never even thought about building a guitar. This is it for me. But what I always have the hardest time articulating to folks who don't make is what it is about making something with my hands, seeing it in my mind, and then spending 2 weeks thinking about it every night when I go to bed, and then finally executing it, and then seeing that thing in front of you. Not even have to be a guitar, but just making something with your hands. What is it about that, you think, that you love so much?
Well, for me, I guess if I ever experienced an endorphin, it didn't come from running, but it did come from making something that I'm pleased with.
Yeah.
Especially when it starts to go a little bit wrong and you fix it. Or you take a detour and come all the way back around and it's like, saved that one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, it's pleasing. And I think we're probably all wired differently.
Yeah.
Maybe some guy that's in sales, he gets that feeling, she gets that feeling from taking that customer and bringing them to the point where it's like, yeah, I can serve them, I can, you know, some people like, I sold that, that's great, that's what they're looking for. But other people, I had a guitar salesman that I knew for a long time, and he said, I just paired another person up with the guitar that they love.
That's what gives them life.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wonderful thought, right? And for me, when I can take what was, it could have been firewood, you know, a tree, and cut it, bend it, put it together. I build furniture too, which I really like. And when you're done, you have this thing that you made.
Yeah.
And you're like, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And then I think, what am I going to build now? You know, you sort of eat that meal and you want to build something else. So if you don't enjoy the work of doing it, I don't think you're going to enjoy the result of doing it.
Yeah. You have to just like, because it's beautiful and romantic, the thought of making something, but when it comes down to like making the thing, it can be incredibly challenging and frustrating, but also very exciting and something new to look forward to. And I noticed even just in the comments on our videos, people that have this romantic idea of what it is to build guitars in our case, but to build something, and then they get into it and realize it's not for them. And I think that some people are they're wired to be physical makers, you know, and I think that you'll realize it real quickly once you start trying to build something, whether it's for you or not.
Yeah, building a lot of things that I do, let's say if I take my Land Cruiser, I set it up, I go to Baja, I camp. I've been doing that for so long I can't even tell you. But every time I'm camping, I'm thinking about the next time I'm going to camp.
Yeah,
I don't like where this was in the drawer. Why didn't I bring this? This is a part of camping that seems like work. I want to make it easier. That's how my mind works, and that's how my mind works in building a factory. My mind works like going through the Thanksgiving buffet and thinking about seconds while you're loading your plate the first time through.
It sounds like to me that what I'm hearing is not as obvious as you would think it would be, but yes, you build guitars, but you built a factory and you built a company, and that to you was just like not so different than building a guitar, building a company.
I like building the way to make guitars more than I like building the guitar.
Interesting. And that would explain to me, hearing what you're saying explains to me so much why Taylor Guitars, you have set yourselves apart by figuring out how to take all the things that everybody's been doing for so long and do it better, do it more efficiently, do it with less waste, you know, all of those things. Hearing the way your brain works right now makes so much sense for that.
Especially when it goes all the way back to I wanted to build guitars. I knew I wanted to build guitars. I loved guitars, I loved building the guitar, I wanted to keep doing. I didn't want to go do another thing with my life. There was no alternate plan B that I would have liked just as much.
Yeah.
There was no other plan. It was a scary plan. You know, it was the early 70s. There was no, I mean, at that time, Preston Stewart at Stu Mac was selling a banjo kit.
Yeah.
You know, there was no place to buy anything.
Yeah.
Some of the violin companies in Germany had violin making tools, nothing else, you know. So I wanted to build guitars. And so the first thought is, if I'm going to build a guitar, I have to sell it so that I get to do it again.
Yeah. Okay.
And if I'm going to do that, I have to make a living at it. So I want to make a good guitar, but equal to that thought, maybe even more important to that thought, is if I can make a living, I can get better. If I can't make a living, I will have to quit.
Sure.
So quitting doesn't make you better.
Yeah.
Building more makes me better. Building more makes me better. So the primary goal was for me to get better at getting them made.
Yeah.
And the great thing about guitars is it starts at such a low condition anyway, compared to this thing that I wear, this thing that I have on, these glasses that I have. The manufacturing of this outstrips the manufacturing for guitars. You go to AutoZone and buy a carburetor piece, and you're like, I get to buy this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not an easy thing to make.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I do.
This iPhone, how do you make that? So with guitars, you don't have to do a bad job to get better at it. You can do a good job to get better at it. You have almost a lifetime of getting faster by doing it better.
Interesting. It's stuff that you're saying is like light bulb moment for me. It's like, yes, you're articulating what it is that I've been feeling over the course of the last 15 years of same way. That all makes a lot of sense, and it's a way of explaining how do you get to where you are, and people see it and they go, I can't do that, because they don't see that gap in time of where you did all the learning, and I think that's the barrier to entry for so many folks.
Yeah, let's say you're all thumbs and you just can't bend a side. Okay, can you make a bender that bends sides? Make it. That's easier. Then put it on and bend the sides.
It's true.
Okay, I got sides bent.
Yeah.
Any questions?
It's blowing my mind, because like what you're saying is so like it's so obvious, right? But very few people, I feel like, think that way. You see the object and go, how do I make it? You're thinking about, how do I make the thing that makes the thing? Right. How do I make the thing that makes the thing better?
And no matter, with guitars, no matter how much of that you do, you're only going to cover about 25% of the guitar building. A lot of people go, oh, robots make it. Robots can't make a guitar. Sorry, they can't. Yep. It doesn't matter if when I'm done bending sides, I still have to block it, cut them to length, kerf it, shape it, do all that stuff. And there's no machinery. If the guitar industry were huge and you were making literally millions of them, you could build a factory, that
basically
does a bunch of
guitars.
And especially if they were all the same. But as we have 7 body shapes and 120 every one of them takes a lot of handwork.
Yeah, and there's no way of getting around that. Yeah. Anytime we have somebody who claims that because I own a CNC machine, that means that their guitars are like basically automatically made, I'm like, I give them grace, because I'm like, well, they just fundamentally don't understand it. You know what I mean? It's easy to look at and see that, but
it's kind of like it's kind of like when you show someone a nice photograph and they go, wow, you must have a really nice camera. Exactly. Yeah, it just jumped out of my pocket and took that photograph all by itself. Here, knock yourself out. Or when people see my furniture, they go, oh yeah, you've got all the machines. I'm like, no. There they are. Go in there and make that thing with those machines. See how you do.
Or the flip to it with the camera analogy: people that go out and buy a $3,000 DSLR and then think that that's going to make them a good photographer, and it's like
it's not gonna.
Yeah, it's
not gonna.
Yep, exactly.
Light makes you a good photographer.
That's right.
You almost can't do wrong when the light's right. Exactly. You get like I used to take a lot of nature photography, and I was in Savannah, Georgia, and there was this beautiful building. I wanted to take a picture of it, and there was this guy with a big old tripod, and he's just sitting there, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Waiting for the light." And then the light came. He'd click, he put it in his car, and he left. But he waited for 4 hours. And I wanted to take a picture when I was in Hawaii recently, and I never forgot that, him just say, waiting for the light. And it was a cloudy day like this. I wanted to take a picture of something really important. I wanted it to be beautiful. I have my iPhone, and I'm like, I'm gonna wait. And the clouds came apart for 10 seconds, light came down, I went click with my iPhone, and you could blow that up.
And you'd look like a genius.
You look like a genius.
Yeah, and nature did all the work. It's so fascinating. I love that.
But you got to know that you have to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, like most things in life, you can't force them. Okay, so I got one more question for you, and I do thank you so much for the time that you've given us. I know
Yeah, I love it.
It's a super busy
We're talking
week.
about guitars.
Exactly.
And there's food on the other side of the door.
We're
I mean,
excited about that. You've always been really candid about all the people that have helped you, especially in your early days, folks that you kind of reached out to or that kind of reached out to you and held your hand when you needed it and connected dots for you. You're in a position now where you're doing that. I mean, you're doing literally that right now. Who are some of the people that you've been able to help out in little ways that they needed it, that you stand back now and kind of go, I'm really, really amazed and proud of what they're doing these days, and not taking credit for what they're doing, but just proud to know that you're a part of that story.
I have a friend, his name's Paul Akers. He has a company called FastCap.
Fast what?
FastCap.
Okay.
Go to fastcap.com. He makes tools for woodworkers. He's kind of like a Stu Mack kind of company, but he does it for regular stuff. He's also has become a worldwide teacher of like a Toyota Way type of a lean. PaulAkers.com. He worked for me when he was 17. I taught him I was 23.
Okay.
But I'm like, here's what I've been learning, Paul.
Yeah.
And to this day, he'll go, what you taught me there is, and this is where like the student passes the teacher on that type of stuff. It's amazing if you saw his company. People can, I've just said the name, they can look him up. There have been, one thing that I like, I'm going to jump all the way to here. One thing I love doing now, which is why I contacted you, is there's a lot of woodworkers doing great YouTube stuff. And I watch that. What's the average time watched on YouTube? 2.5 seconds,
Yeah.
It is so low. The whole world is just reels now. I mean,
Yeah.
if it takes longer than 30 seconds,
They're out.
they're out.
Yeah.
Right. But I'll watch the hour-long video of someone doing something nice. And when I really get into it, there's some makers down here in the boutique shop that I've contacted. You'll know them, but I'll write someone a private message or get to them through YouTube or through their Facebook and go, hey, this is who I am, because people know who I am. Even if they're building furniture, they know who I am. And so to encourage somebody now, it's like, hey, Chris, I've been watching your stuff. You have a really great channel. Love what you're doing. It's such a good channel. I like what you're doing. Maybe you'd like to come out and see what a big factory looks like intimately. I'd be happy to do that. And so to encourage people like that, Chris at Four Eyes Studio, furniture builder, reach out to him. He comes down, we talk about it. He's like, I've always wanted to build a guitar. I'll show you.
Yeah.
Do the project, make a YouTube out of it with me teaching you how to do it one at a time. And then a lot of factories, I could tell you that every factory that there is, one of the joys of my life is that I'm friends with them and I've helped them a lot. And they've helped me back.
Sure.
It's the best friends I have.
That's a very niche world, so to be able to understand what it is to run a factory. And to what you just said, I can't tell you from my end, receiving, first of all, you commented on one of our videos like 2 years ago, and because you wrote, this is Bob Taylor. And I remember I reached out to him and I was like, some guy named Bob Taylor commented on our videos, like, there's no way it's Bob Taylor. And then you hit me and you sent me an email a few months ago and I was like, what? After the initial, like, how is this happened, it's so satisfying and encouraging to know that, like, just doing your work, other people see it who have done amazing things and go, keep it up. And that is enough to put a fire behind me for years to come. And I can't thank you enough for doing that to me. I know that for you it's just a little thing that you did, but it makes a difference. It really does. It gives me so much encouragement to know that, like, we're all on different paths, but the fact that somebody who I've looked up to, I had posters of Taylor guitars, your famous tree in the middle of an advertisement that says, this is just a tree. The lucky ones get to be guitars. That was hanging up in my bedroom as a teenager, and to be sitting here interviewing you, and not just because I'm a guy doing interviews, but because you reached out to me as a peer who's a woodworker and a maker, it gives me everything. Well,
we're in Anaheim at a NAMM show. The first NAMM show I went to was in the Disneyland Hotel ballroom the booths were 10 by 10, even the big companies, and I walked through there, 20 years old, like, I can't even imagine being able to be a part of this. I don't know how you get there.
Yeah.
Well, if you do get there and you become like a thing, it's like, wow, that's a real blessing.
Yeah.
And if you could share that with other people, in a way, I sort of feel like my generation is now at succession. We're aging out. I have, you know, my dear friend Bill Collings passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
You know, we're all getting older, but there's a whole nother generation. And builders like you, the guitars you make, are they're better than guitars that we made 50 years ago.
Because of the access to information,
There's
I think.
just a lot of information, and people just get better at it, and I love it. And but we all just get up, put on our jeans, and go to work.
That's right.
I remember early, maybe it was our first year of business, we were just sitting there like we had no idea what to do. How are we going to get till tomorrow? And I said to my partner Kurt, I go, right now, as we speak, there's a bunch of guys at Yamaha, that big corporation. They're sitting around a table and they're trying to figure out what to do next. Why can't we be as good at figuring out what to do next as they are?
It's true.
Why can't we? And that's what I like to try and encourage people to do. I can't tell them how to do it, but I can tell them you can figure it out if you really want to.
Yeah.
You know, if you really want to, you can figure it out. And if not, give me a call.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Bob. I appreciate it so much.
You bet, Chris. It was really fun.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Uh-huh.